Evening, y'all. Tonight we're going to be painting this Fenrisian wolf using a variety of Citadel paints as well as some other materials. We're going to be using some simple techniques to keep the process easy, as well as give some good variety to this mini. Let's get going. The first thing I'm going to do is fix the seam in this wolf's head. I got this mini out of storage, and after I primed him, I realized there was quite the gap in his face, so I'm going to use some Vallejo plastic putty to fix that. Using a wet brush, I'm just going to smooth out the edges a little bit to keep the surface flush. Now ideally you would apply this putty before priming the model, but it won't really matter after we apply all the other paints to come. Next up we're going to do his base. I was going to use the Citadel Sterling mud, but I realized my pot was completely empty. So instead we're going to use AK Terrain's Dark Earth. Because this material is so thick, it's pretty rough on the brush, so definitely don't use your nice brushes for this. I'm using a junky old brush that I've had forever, and that way you don't have to worry about it ruining a nice tip. I'm also applying this material first because it'll take a little while to dry, and once it does, I'll have finished other parts of the wolf, and I'll be able to apply some of the same paints that I will apply to the wolf to the base as well. So getting it applied now and giving that drying time will allow the overall process to be more efficient. If you accidentally get some of this mud on the mini itself, just clean your brush up and get it wet and apply it to that mud, and you can see it just liquefies. So then you just clean your brush up again, dry it off, and start sweeping over that area. Repeat that process a few times and you'll just be able to clean that mud off the mini. And that's better. Now that the putty on the face is dried, we're going to be using Citadel Dryad Bark to cover the whole mini. Now I've got a good amount of paint on the palette, and I'm going to thin it down with some water so that it doesn't go on with a lumpy texture. I'm also going to be using a large base brush so that I can cover the mini very quickly. Once that paint is dried, we're going to be using Citadel Mornfang Brown. Now we've got a solid base coat on our Fenrisian wolf. Next up, we're going to be using Scrag Brown. I'm going to be a little more selective about where I place this paint. There we go. Next up, we're going to use Xandri Dust. I'm again going to be selective about where I place this, mainly in the thicker furs, and again on the face. That's looking nice. Once that coat's dry, we're going to be applying Argrax Earthshade. Argrax Earthshade is what's known as a wash paint. It's a liquid that seeps into the recesses and shades them. We're just going to be applying it to the entire mini. As you can see, that wash paint really added a layer of shading and depth to this wolf. While the wash paint dries, I'm going to dry brush some lighter shades of brown onto the mud texture which we applied earlier. Now put some Argrax Earthshade on its base. Once that wash paint is dried, I'm going to go back over the entire miniature with some Xandri Dust. For this step I'm going to do some dry brushing. As you can see, I've gotten a large brush and I wiped the majority of the Xandri Dust off. This way when I wipe the brush over the model, it'll just leave paint on the raised portions and leave the undersides and grooves still a shaded recess. There we go. Next up we're going to do some more dry brushing with Ushap de Bone. I'm going to concentrate this in the furry portions where we had concentrated the Xandri Dust earlier. Next we're going to dry brush with some Screaming Skull. Again, localizing this dry brushing into those really furry portions. They're just getting brighter and brighter. There he is. Now we're going to use some Seraphim Sepia wash on the areas where we've concentrated those bone colors. Now I've got a lot of variety going on this mini so far. Next up, we're going to be dry brushing some Celestia Grey on the base as well as parts of the fur. Now we're going to be dry brushing with Ulthuan Grey. And now we're going to be dry brushing with some White Scar. Next, a little Abaddon black for the eyes. Now I'm going to use Ushabti Bone and Screaming Skull on his teeth. And lastly, we're going to use some Valhallan Blizzard on his base. Much like the AK Mud Terrain, this is a material that's quite hard on the brush, so don't use your nice brushes for this process. There we go. Really nice snow effect on that base. One thing to note is that I could have stopped at any time in this process. We could have used any combination of these paints and had a very satisfying effect, but incorporating all of them gives a lot of variety to the fur. There we go, our fully painted Fenrisian wolf using Citadel paints, AK terrain effects, and Vallejo plastic putty. Get them now at PC Hobbies.